Powered by Riverside FM.
The original Wolfenstein 3D is one of the few games that can call itself a true genre codifier. Developed by id Software in 1992, it was a World War II adventure game that, through smart design and groundbreaking technology, created the modern-day first-person shooter. In short, this very podcast wouldn't exist if not for Wolfenstein 3D. All of this is to say, then, that Wolfenstein is a franchise that should be treated with respect. Today, you'd believe that was always the case. Machine Games' Wolfenstein: The New Order was the start of a brilliant new series of games that harkens back to the old designs of Wolf 3D, with modern-day sensibilities. And yet, in the era of the Xbox and the 360, there were other Wolfenstein games. At the height of the World War II shooter, brought about by DreamWorks' Saving Private Ryan and the Spielberg-led Medal of Honor, new id Software publishers Activision dusted off the Wolfenstein license and gave it to Grey Matter Interactive. Return to Castle Wolfenstein would be just that, a remake of sorts of the first game, with all the modern bells and whistles of the Quake 3 Arena engine. Then, just like Quake 4, the Wolfenstein license was entrusted to longtime id collaborators Raven Software. They too owe their success to the original Wolfenstein 3D. If it wasn't for that game's critical success, it's unlikely that id would create Doom. And subsequently there would be no Heretic nor Hexen to innovate from there. So not only would Raven have to step up and reimagine the franchise that made their careers possible, but they'd also have to make a game that could compete in the genre it created, which by the year of its release was becoming dominated by Activision's own homegrown shooter. Was their mission successful? Or is there a reason that this title has been swept under the rug of gaming history? On this episode of Bullet Time, our mini-series on the shooters of Raven Software continues with 2009's Wolfenstein. I look like Big Joel's stunt double. So, inside of the foam fortress. By the way, what do you think of what do you think of my foam fortress?
I mean, that part looks great. I think it looks very professional.
Oh, thank you. It's cardboard boxes that I've sprayed and put acoustic foam on, so you wouldn't tell, you know.
Jacob, have you seen what his mic looks like now? Can you
God,
turn the camera
yeah.
towards the mic?
Yeah, let me put this.
The mic has its own foam fortress.
Oh my god.
It looks like Wheatley from Portal 2. It's great.
James was very upset about the quality of his audio in the first bunch of episodes we recorded, and then he, I think he overcompensated.
Swaddled his microphone.
I definitely overinvested in it. I was like, okay, well, I got the thumbnail savings. I'm not putting them towards anything. I will spend as much on the foam dome for my microphone as I will on the foam fortress, which I think they both came to about 40 quid each. So
I mean, I'm just in kind of like an upstairs room of my house, and I've done very little soundproofing, and I'm also an audio idiot, and so I listen to it and I'm like, it sounds fine, but I'm sure that it could be improved if I hung up foam everywhere.
It's great.
Oh yeah,
Perfect.
And it's a shame because it's like everywhere that I've lived is like rented apartments, so it's just, if you put anything on this wall, we will take all the money you owe. And it's like, okay, great. And so it's just like, well, what's my solution then? I guess I could make my own walls, because I had a look on Amazon and it's just like, yeah, we have acoustic standing solutions, $1,000. And it's like, I feel like I could do this cheaper because the acoustic foam itself is only like 30 quid. Right. So, yeah. So I walked over to a hardware store, bought cardboard boxes and spray glue, and here we are.
There's that thing in
this economy,
in the Supergiant documentary, like the Hades thing, where they start doing everything from home, and who is it, like Darren Korb, whoever, essentially has like a phone booth made out of foam that he goes into to record, or he's just like,
that's amazing,
doing the Zagreus voice.
God,
is that the no clip one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good podcast.
I have not been able to look at Hades the same way since Lamhoot's video.
I haven't watched it yet. Is it good?
It's wild how good it is. Yeah, check it out. It'll blow your mind. It'll blow your hair back.
Speaking of checking stuff out, hey folks, welcome to the Bullet Time podcast. I thought I might as well say that at some point. We haven't quite got there yet, but hey, as always, I'm James, host of the podcast. What's the mini-series? Oh, it's that's Raven. It's where we've been talking about Raven software games for the past couple of weeks, and oh boy, we're getting to the end of it. But before we get there, we got some biggies. And this is one of them. Well, I guess we've had a couple of biggies along the way. Like we did Star Wars games, which are pretty,
This is pretty big.
Yeah,
they're a big deal.
But I would say this is a pretty big deal. And because this is a pretty big deal, folks, we had to get out the big guns for our Big Gun podcast to talk about this big gun game. So, folks, you know who it is. I don't need to introduce them. It's the William Deathhead Strauss of video game literature himself, Kevin from PixelLit. Put your hands together for him.
Oh, God. Just because I'm German, James.
Oh, fuck, I totally forgot that was a point, yeah. Because I was running in my head, I was like, should I give him the name of a fictional Nazi? Would that be offensive? But I was like, well, I called him the villains of all the other games so far. So
yeah, I mean, so far, it tracks for the rest of the series, but, this one is... Dicey Dungeons.
Deathhead was a real man, so it's disrespectful to his memory.
There was a real guy who looked like a terrifying skeleton man who loved to cut people up. You should be a bit more respectful about that. Kevin, I just to clarify for the folks at home, I'm not insinuating that Kevin has any allegiances with the National Socialist Party of Germany. Merely that when it comes to video game literature, people could consider him one of that. Okay.
Thankfully, I'm my family's Irish.
Our special guest is video maker and games enthusiast Jacob Geller. Hello, Jacob.
The BJ Blazkowicz of the Bullet Time
There we go.
podcast.
Yeah.
There we go.
I was
That works.
in this game. He looks. He has much closer to my hairstyle than in the Machine Games one. So I was kind of excited to see that.
Yeah.
Finally, they're giving him a beautiful head of black hair. I hope they don't refer on that. I think there is a quote at the beginning as well, because they redo the beginning of Return to Castle Wolfenstein, where he goes to the OSS and he talks to the big comical guy and the tall general guy, and I think one of them says, "Oh, he's dyed his hair for this mission" or something, but it's like very obviously ADR'd, like after the fact, because it's like, oh god, people don't like like there were previews and reviews that I found for this, which was like, I don't like the fact that they dyed BJ Blazkowicz's his hair, and it's like, when this game came out, I mean, I didn't really know what Wolfenstein was when this game came out, but I would be shocked that he even had hair in the previous games, No,
he was a
he
beautiful
looks,
blonde man.
Yeah, it's like all of this in context of the Machine Games ones. It's like, oh, it's so incredible that they made him look like the old BJ, but this meaningful guy. Or in this game, he just looks like the most video game protagonist. He looks like the placeholder for the BioShock Infinite character, where it's like, we know it's gonna look like some white guy with dark hair.
He looks like Frank West from Dead Rising.
He's seen wars, it's clear that they just downloaded it. They just grabbed an asset off of the internet and be like, oh damn, we never replaced that.
Kevin, we'll probably find out that was probably the model that they had for the Quake 4 guy, which they couldn't get looking right in Quake 4. But the technology finally, George Lucas with the prequels, where he's like, well, I had to wait for the technology to catch up so I could do the Clone Wars. I had to wait for the technology to catch up for those models to look good.
Yeah.
God. Jacob, I think people might know who you are at home, but just in case, do you want to introduce yourself properly? What's
Sure.
your thing?
my name is Jacob Geller. I make video essays on YouTube about video games and art and other topics. I have notably, at least for me, one of the most important videos on my channel is one about Wolfenstein and kind of the way that Wolfenstein interacts with history and whatever. And so I was excited to receive the invitation with this game specifically, which I had never played. And I thought, okay, well, you know, I'm a Wolfenstein guy, but don't really have the series history to back that up. So here I am. I've played it now.
So as a follow-on question then, as a fan of the machine games, Wolfensteins, and what they're able to do with both BJ's character and his like kind of religion and just the idea of dealing with the ideology of fascism, how do you feel Wolfenstein 2009 pays homage to that?
Well, in this one, he has an amulet, so, you know.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, very, very good point.
Yeah, they remove, you know, basically all of the plot resonance and interesting character, but he does have an amulet, so can't argue with that.
In this one, he has a Bioshock.
That's true, yeah. At this point, they hadn't figured out how to write, you know, interesting characters in games, but they had figured out how to do a cool system where you'd swap between the light world and the dark worlds, right? They had to, like, weigh up where their engine priorities were.
They have figured out what to do with the left hand.
Yes.
It is so bizarre how many... I mean, I think this is really one of the things that you're going to find with this podcast of, like, where it's like, why was that a design trend? Where it's like, there's a light world and a dark world. And, like, that is a specific enough concept that is still in, like, 40 different games somehow, all around this time period.
It's very weird. So, like, this comes out in 2009, and... there was like a weird fascination with Dark World stuff like a few years prior because Metroid Prime 2 tries to do a similar idea, but like it's not able to have it like flip like on a button press. It's not like you have to go through like different ports and stuff and they load it in. But I guess with this, they kind of like then they managed to crack the idea of, you just kind of have this overlay to it, but that is literally all it is. It's just a color overlay.
What is the game that people really like that does... I think it's a PS2 game that has, like, the very impressive light world, dark world, that I can picture the character in my head. It's one of those, like, very interesting, dynamic PS2-looking characters. I'll figure it out at some point.
Because when you said there is a game that people like that does that, I think Link to the Past was the one that popped into my head, because, like... that's the first one to properly do.
Yeah,
right.
That's a very famous PS2 game.
Oh gosh, what it is. And then, you know, you have other things like, honestly, a perfect candidate for this show, that game Haze, I think. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, no,
Haze.
We'll be talking
about Haze.
Haze is coming up.
Right, of kind of like, you're seeing the glitzy version and then the non-glitzy one. But keep talking and I'll figure out this one that I'm thinking of.
So while Jacob is digging into that, I'm going to talk about what's happening in the world.
Yeah, sure, because this comes out in 2009, and there is actually something pretty decently relevant to the game that we're talking about today. So
the weekend after it comes out, Inglourious Bastards is #1 at the box office.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And the weekend before it came out, it was District 9. And then over in the music world, the top of the charts was I Got a Feeling by Black Eyed Peas. The Black Eyed Peas were pretty hot that summer. Previously at top of the charts.
First year of the Obama registration, and that's just the song of it. No more problems.
Yeah. We got
feelings. I got them.
I Got a Feeling and Boom Boom Pow were the two Black Eyed Peas songs that year. To take you back to 2009, and over in the news, Bolivia allows indigenous people to self-rule, and on the flip side, the UK does UK things and imposes direct rule on Turks and Caicos.
I didn't do that, though. I wasn't involved. Just want to clarify to the people at home, I was not involved in that.
So that's what's happening in the worlds in entertainment. when Wolfenstein 09 is released.
So Inglourious Basterds is the intro.
Was that intentional, you think, or?
I don't know. I think it's just purely those things kind of happen.
Or it's just World War II media just so ubiquitous
World War II media has continued to be popular since Saving Private Ryan. And it's one of those weird things that I think to kind of like dig into why we even have Wolfenstein 09 is that obviously first one comes out in the 80s. It's a stealth game for the Macintosh by Silas Warner, where half of it is he has an interest in kind of World War II movies, but wanted to do something a little bit slower paced. And also, isn't it like text-to-speech technology he's working on? So basically, all the guards in the game, they all they say phrases and stuff, and that's like the big selling point of that game. Years after the fact, John Romero, working at Soft Disk, says, "I really liked this game when I was a kid. We should make a new version of it." And Carmack goes, "Well, I've written this engine that draws 3D walls really quickly. Maybe we can combine the two together." At some point, Carmack goes, "The stealth stuff is boring. We should drop it and just do FPS stuff." And they go, "Okay." And then inadvertently, they invent the first-person shooter with Wolfenstein 3D.
Oops.
From there, the whole thing stretches out. We'll probably dig into this a little bit.
Oh,
yeah, go right ahead.
What's the game?
The game was Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. Was the one I was thinking of, which was actually much earlier than I thought, and I think credit to that game, it kind of looked like a later PS2, but it was actually in like 2000. Anyway, there we go. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, a very important game for Light and Dark Worlds.
Very important game, folks.
Isn't Blood Rain also in that?
Yes, I think it's
Reverse or something. Blood Omen.
Multiple blood. Yeah,
there's a lot of blood.
There's a lot of blood. All I know is Uwe Boll made a movie based out of one of them.
Starring Sir Ben Kingsley.
Oh, he really does anything, doesn't he?
He literally will.
That's what got him knighted.
Yeah, literally. The Queen's just knighted him and said, "Oh, loved you in Blood Rain." And he's like, "Oh, thanks, Mom. Much appreciated."
Uwe Boll, the Raven Software of video game movie adaptations.
No, Raven's bad.
Hey, now I kind of like this game.
That's too mean to Raven.
Fucking Paul W.S. Anderson is the Raven Software.
Paul W.S. Anderson. Yeah.
Sometimes Paul Thomas Anderson is the film. It's the Raven Software. But Activision. So we'll get into this more in the Hexen 2 episode, but Activision owns Raven Software at this point, and it's mostly a ploy to be like, "Hey, it's software. We got you guys, work with us." And they go, "Okay, you can have we'll publish through you, and you can have some of our IPs." And through that, Activision gets to do Return to Castle Wolfenstein, because this is like the year after Medal of Honor blows up on the PS1, and they're like, World War II games are big. What we got? And they haven't figured out to buy Infinity Ward yet to make the first Call of Duty. So they go, let's do a Wolfenstein game. Let's get these guys called Zaytrick, who will become Grey Matter, to work on it. And so that happens. And then World War II games just continue to be popular for years. And then in 2006 or 2007, Raven Software gets contacted and they're told, "We want a new Wolfenstein game, but could you make it like, something to appeal to the masses? What do the people like? Well, you guys, you got that juice. You made the Jedi games and Quake 4. You know what the people like. Go ahead.
BJ force powers."
And so they ended up giving BJ. They gave BJ the BioShock powers, and also made it a bit like.
Honestly,
game.
I think it's a slandering BioShock a little bit to say it's like the BioShock powers were like bees and ice and stuff, and this one is
the
you
BioShock
can slow down
cool.
or you can make your bullets stronger. Like those are your options.
the bullet stronger one, I was like, I'm never using this. Why am I using this? It's just a waste of the charge.
It is like the ultimate. It feels like a game that should have been made in the Unreal Engine in regards to, well, this trigger is for shooting, but this trigger is for the magic. And the magic is basically look through walls, slow down time, make my bullets better, take less harm. It is like the least imaginative stuff that they do with this. concept of the Black Sun and like this fantasy world that they've invented.
The whole world of an alternate dimension is opened up to you, and the thing you can do is you can take less
slow down
damage
time a little bit.
Though I mean,
faster.
look, the slowing down time is great. Like we can
great in
say
every game.
it always works, but it's
That's
not
why
the
the
most imaginative.
Always time for bullet time.
Literally, that's why we call bullet time, folks. It's the best thing that you can add to any game. It's just a thing to slow down so you can move a reticule in a console game. Because oh boy, they couldn't quite figure out how to do that yet. It is still well, I guess at this point, the first Gears of War is out, so like they have kind of figured out how to do console control stuff. But yeah, but then again, it's weird. This feels like an Unreal Engine game, but it's not. This is like the last iteration of the Doom 3 engine that they used like initially for Quake 4. They've managed to polish this up to such a sheen that it feels like a Call of Duty game. And then their next game, which feels like an old throwback, is actually made in Unreal Engine 3 and Singularity, and that's where Activision says to him, "Yeah, it didn't sell well enough. Call of Duty DLCs for you forever and ever." And it's like, oh, thanks, guys.
So
Banished to the Shadow Realm.
What did y'all play this on? Do you have an attachment on this show to kind of trying to do it on original hardware? Because James sent me it on PC and I played it on that, and felt fairly modern.
Kevin, you go first because we drafted you into this series because one, you like Raven Software games, and two, in your own words, you're our resident old, so you're the PC shooter.
Resident old. Yeah.
You're the guy who remembers most of these eras and the hardware that we used them in. So
yeah, I'm almost 40. That counts. Yeah. So I played this on. I just downloaded it on the My Abandonware and fired it up and played it on PC, and that's mouse and keyboard all the way, just like God intended.
Meanwhile, I tried looking for I tried to borrow an Xbox 360 in time for the podcast. Didn't have much luck with it, and so I said, okay, I'll try the PC version. Discovering that it had absolutely exceptional controller support to the extent that even all the prompts update to say what buttons you're using. And I'm like, okay, I'll just play it on controller as well, because the interesting thing about this series, and I guess it'll make more sense whenever we talk about the free radical stuff, is that that's what I'm used to in FPS games. It's just playing them with a controller. And so playing this game was wonderful because this game was also designed for consoles first and foremost.
Right.
So it's like, oh, this feels great on a controller. It shoots great. Tip-top stuff. But I had to use... So interesting thing with this game is that if people at home want to give it a go, there is no apart from old Amazon listings and potentially CEX for the console versions, there's no way to play this game, and it is purely because it came out as Bethesda bought it from Activision, and they were like, well, there's an actual interview with one of the producers at Bethesda.
Now, I don't think it's... Now, what you can say is that there's no way to buy the game.
No.
It is available on My Abandonware. I don't know what the legality of that is, but it is abandoned. The publisher has given up on it, so there is it's just there as a download.
A Bethesda member of staff said of the game he thought that Activision did a crap job on it. So they're not a big fan of Wolfenstein 09. I think maybe I don't know, maybe after this podcast they may change their mind and go, no, we're putting it back on consoles, folks. Bringing it back to Game Pass now that we own... they own,
it's Game Pass it up.
They're all under the Microsoft.
There are certainly worse first-person titles available.
Oh yeah, there are worse Wolfenstein games available.
For this podcast. The Wolfenstein 09, hilariously, is the top of the list for on this mini-series here for us, because it's it's a solid shooter. I mean, sure, it has some weird design decisions. The UI is just basic. It's like it was ripped from another game, didn't you say, James? It was just like copy and pasted from something else.
I was about to say the whole compass system just looks like Call of Duty 2. It's great.
The magic powers are about as lame as magic powers get, but all in all, it's it's
okay.
good.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing that like doesn't work. It's like you never get to a point in the game where other than I feel like there should be a checkbox if there's not already on the show for like terrible final boss that you can like check off. Yeah. But like I never had to like use a walkthrough. I never had to like reload an older save. Like in the very faint praise of like it is functional. It absolutely is, and a slightly higher praise like I was never having a bad time playing it, like it just kind of massages the parts of your brain that you want to be massaged while you're playing a dumb first-person shooter.
Exactly. That's what I always say. I'm always saying, were I video essaying again, my first video back would be in praise of competence. Because we don't talk about just like a game, like we're always looking for the games that are like, it does something new, and like, no, I don't want to do something new. I want a game that fucking works from beginning to end and tell it just moves. It doesn't have to redesign the wheel or whatever. It's just be competent. That's all I want.
I'm just laughing at the concept of like people are making these like really hard hitting essays, and yours is just like, why don't we celebrate games that do okay?
I like the game that works.
I like the game that works. We don't talk about those enough. Shooting right for the middle. That's my take.
You're hoping for a job at the Washington Post after the license. Hey,
yes. But yeah,
I will say this much. When we started planning out the podcast, this was the game that I was like, this and like two other games I was like the most excited about finally playing for the first time, because I always knew about Wolfenstein, and I think I had the Xbox Live Arcade demo for this back when Xbox 360 demos were just like the hot thing in regards to, I don't need to buy a full game, I can just download a little snippet of and see what it's like. And the demo is the initial train section of that game, which I think is really, it's not like exceptional, but it's like a really solid start in regards to, they trick you with, you can see the trains which have like targets on them where, the trick is, that would be what a normal tutorial would look like, but then it fills with soldiers because it's like, this is where all the collaborators are, get them. And it's like, okay, no, you have to learn on the fly now. And it's like, okay, this is a really cool opening. And so there's a nice mix of open arena style areas, nice little corridor areas. And then eventually they introduce like the first power that you get, which is the time. Oh no, they don't have any powers at that point, do they? But they do have.
Right.
The gravity turns off and on, which again is like a really nice set piece.
The beginning, when you don't know what's going on and it's like a train car blows up, and it's kind of like the whole building is progressively blowing up, and there are just Nazis that will start like floating and then falling down. It's like, it's really good. Like it very much gets the kind of like, I don't know what the hell is going on here, but like guys are floating.
It's the perfect demonstration of what that game is, which is like, it has the sheen of a Call of Duty title where it's, a World War II game, but then it adds the science fiction element to it, which is exactly what you want from a Wolfenstein game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously the New Order event goes in a different direction with that, where it's more kind of on the crunchy diesel punk side of stuff of it's what you kind of recognize, but what happens after that. But this is like Indiana Jones stuff. It's magic mixed with like kind of a real world historical event, and in that regards it's like when that stuff, like my other favorite level of this game is when you go into like the cave system underneath Eisenstadt, and it is like purely Indiana Jones stuff, and it's like, this is great, like really, this is where Raven's really shining in regards to being love doing fantasy stuff. High fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
And then the bits where it kind of starts to falter a little bit even though I do think this is a really solid game, it is when it feels like another first-person shooter where you're in a factory or like in a like the farm level is quite decent, but then like there are like
yeah, I think that's that. I agree. When it stops being weird is the weakest parts. It's like it's got to lean into the weird. It's got to lean into the high concept adventure, fantasy, magic, whatnot. I think that's the best parts of it. And when it's just like shoot Nazis, then it's just like, oh well, there's 50,000 other games that do that. It doesn't really. That's not really distinguishing anything right now.
Yeah, one of the most kind of like interesting on paper, but ultimately I think the most boring parts of the game is this. I hesitate to even call it a hub world, but like there is a town that you're returning to between linear missions, and it's like the idea of it is kind of cool, and you could almost see in kind of like a Prague and Deus Ex or something of like, oh, you're gonna learn all the routes through this, but it's like it's just nothing, and those are kind of like the least weird parts of the game, where it's just like, well, I just have to walk through a bunch of alleyways to get to the next mission, and nothing's gonna happen on the way there except maybe I'll shoot some guys.
It's really unfortunate because like, so we've been going through kind of all the Raven games, and one of their first like really decent innovations is when they go from Heretic to Hexen. Hexen has an open world, well, not an open world, but it has like a hub structure. And the idea is that the hub keeps it's like a little puzzle box that keeps opening up and developing as you keep going back to it. But so when I got to that, like for the first time, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is a callback. And like, you know, you can see what this looks like now in the HD era, but it's exactly as he said. It's just a menu to like go to levels essentially, but just made more convoluted. And on the one hand, it's cute that every time you go back, they introduce a new kind of Nazi in regards to first it's soldiers, but then they start to introduce the ones from like Return to Castle Wolfenstein with no fanfare. The blonde women with
it's like you just come back and there's like a woman in a leather suit running at you. It's like what did she
dominatrixes? The street is lousy with dominatrixes, and they're flipping at you and throwing knives and whatnot. Like, come on, man.
You have the level where you go to the church and like the boss fight in it is the Nazi that gets turned into a spooky like wraith, and it's like, okay, this is cool as a one-off. Oh, they just become a standard enemy type when you're like out and about in the open world, and it's like, okay, this really takes the venom out of the snake on that one.
I think the town, it's like it's one of those concepts where I don't know if they had a broader scope for it planned initially, where it's like oh yeah, if you take these side quests, you unlock this, and that will help you more on your missions or something like that, like a real base building. Because I feel like that's the only real reason to have something like that is to base build that town.
Oh, totally,
because otherwise, it's just an inconvenient way to get across to the next level.
Or like, it doesn't even, because obviously they have the shop, which is like, okay, cool, everybody likes to shop in games. And I think people also just kind of like, I mean, it's weird because it's eventually the two other Wolfenstein games I think do this better in regards to Machine Games does it better from a plot standpoint, because obviously in Wolfenstein 9, the point is the more you go back, the more the resistance builds up and you see like less Nazis and whatever, but then that's not really true because then they bring in like the worst ones, and so it's like it doesn't really feel like it develops. Versus in the New Order and a little bit of the new Colossus, you keep going back and it's like, you know, how's the rest of the Christ South Circle doing? You know, see little stories with those people. But then in like Youngblood, which it's not a great Wolfenstein game, but the open world that they have in that is they do interesting stuff with it, and I guess that's probably down to the fact that Arcane worked on it, and so they like.
Right, but I didn't think about that fact, but it is this is like that model of city, and to its credit, this one does have like different routes that you can take through it. You know, you can kind of go under, you can go over. There are like various building interiors that you can go through. Is very much the thing that Youngblood tries to do, and both times the result are like, think Wolfenstein's probably a linear game. Like, think that this is maybe not what you're supposed to be doing.
It's not Halo. Like, they can't mix up corridors and open world arenas, which is weird because, like, again, it's as you say, you have all these kind of like different like side alleyways and stuff, and so the idea is that, oh, if a firefight gets too hot, I can just skip away, or I could do something else. But they never do anything with it, and I think
maybe it's because Wolfenstein never tries to do any kind of interesting movement stuff, that it is kind of too grounded. Like technically in machine games ones, you get the ability to like go on stilts or whatever, but still it's like fundamentally you are a guy who walks, and like being a guy who walks is not that interesting in an open world when there aren't vehicles and there aren't like, you can't fly, you can't jump really far, etc.
No. Or even like the Daughters event, they have like parkour, and that's like a nice, it's not like to Titanfall 2 levels, but it is like just being able to clamber is really nice to do in an open world game, which again is, as you said, like Raven probably wouldn't think, I mean, I don't know what Raven were thinking when they made this game, but like with machine games, it is very much a thing of BJ's a tank, and so it's kind of like he is very good he can move quickly, but he is solid. He is on the floor.
He's staying on the ground. Yeah.
He's a blunt object. He is not here for surgically removing a problem.
No, absolutely.
Even though you can stealth around in that game if you want to.
It's encouraged pretty much in the second.
It's encouraged in certain levels. I think. Oh fuck! I just lost my point. Where'd it go? It's here somewhere. I think it is kind of interesting, though, that machine games did, like... So Wolf-09 banished from the stores. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's not good enough. And then machine games is like, you know what we're going to do? We're gonna acknowledge it, and our game is going to be technically a sequel to it. And that's like... it's wild.
It was just... the whole time I was playing, I was like... Why do these characters have the same names?
Why do I know Caroline Becker? Yeah.
Because there's like, Caroline, but obviously Death's Head is in it, is kind of like an important character. And I figured I don't know enough about old Wolfenstein lore to know how many of these were also in that. But it's like the Caroline of the machine games thing has no resemblance other than the fact that she is a woman resistance fighter. That's her deal. But they did name her Caroline Becker, and so it's like clearly
and the canonization of it as well is the fact that you think in 09 she's died because she gets shot in the spine, and then you meet her in New Order, and that's why she's paralyzed. And
she says something like, "At least I got to slap Hans Grosse," or something like that.
No, exactly. Who's the final boss of?
Who's the final boss of the game? And just as the Wolfenstein like lore dump here, Hans Grosse is one of the first bosses in the original Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
He's the first boss of 3D. He's the guy you open the door and he says "Guten Tag" and he opens up on you with two chain guns. But yeah, the only it's like Wolf-09 is a loose sequel to Return to Wolfenstein, and then they make. Machine Games makes their first one, and then they make the Old Blood, which which replaces Return to Wolfenstein. Old Blood. So Return to Wolfenstein, like Old Blood, kind of it like overwrites Return to Wolfenstein. So you got canonically, quote unquote, and I'm not the person who really cares about canon normally, but it's just so weird in this case. Canonically, you get Old Blood, Wolf-09, not available to play anywhere. Then you get the Machine Games series,
and I think New Blood is Old Blood kind of tries to not replace it, but so that game has 2 episodes in it, which the first one is like basically a remake of Return to Castle Wolfenstein, where you're escaping from the castle and then you fight Hans Grosse at the end. Because Return to Castle Wolfenstein itself is sort of like a weird remake of the first one, but they introduce new characters to it, including Death's Head, who comes back from that game into this one. But then the second episode is like a weird, not quite remake of Wolf-09 in regards to that's where they put all the occult stuff, because they never really touch that in New Order. It's mostly 09
you
that
know,
kind of plays with it.
It's like the magic in the New Order comes from Das Yehud, the like fictional Jewish sect, where it's like Jews were making of weapons of war, but don't worry, they weren't going to use them. But yeah, it's like there is almost magic stuff in there, but it's all very has a layer of like tech over it, so
Sci-fi.
It feels like it could maybe be true. And it's like, you know, BJ has a laser gun, and that's kind of the most it goes. And so it's just weird thinking about him being the same character and like in the New Order being like, I wish I could still slow down time like I did, you know, 40 years ago.
I sure
That
wish
would be
my
helpful.
medallion didn't explode at the end of the game. And,
Right.
Like, you beat the final boss and the medallion explodes and he just dusts his hands like, oh well, that's the end of another BJ Blazkowicz's
another
adventure.
day in the life of BJ.
Not like nothing in the game, like, because you play like the New Order and the Old Blood, and just Brian Bloom is a voice. Funnily enough, Brian Bloom is a voice actor in this game, but he does grunts for the soldiers. And then years after the fact, he comes back and they have him as BJ. In
They were
the
like,
New
those
Order.
grunts have so much pathos, so we need to make you the main character.
Do you
Those
think like
were-
he was in the recording booth and they had like 4 hours of him being like, back home on the farm, they made me do so much. I did. But they were just like, we're just gonna cut the phonemes out of this, okay? We don't want anything else, but we'll pay you for the time, all right? But yeah, like in the new, I mean, he is just such a brilliant character in the Machine Games in regards to like how much internal life he has. Versus here, where it is very. Like, I don't think he says anything in Wolf 09.
He's not a very interesting person in this one. He's just kind of there.
Yeah, they're kind of doing a Gordon Freeman-y thing about him, where it's like you walk into a room and people are like, oh, BJ, you know, we really need your help. And it's like, he's just a guy who can shoot good. Like, we don't know anything about
BJ, you're
him.
the best at what you do.
Yeah.
Wow, you escaped from Castle Wolfenstein. You must be, like, the best guy. And also you have the medallion, which you don't get it in the game. You just start the game with it in a cutscene. No explanation of how he got... Well,
no,
actually, I found out
you
after...
do, because it's like, it's even stranger where you do, like, the first mission, you find the medallion, that guy's like, give it to me. And you're like, no, I'm gonna keep it. And then the guy's like, he won't give it up. I guess we gotta use it. it's like the most limp attempt by that guy of like, hey, BJ, can you give us our medallion? And BJ's like, I don't think I will. And then that's it.
I literally can't. I have, like, Lego hands stuck in there.
It's stuck in there.
I have to just hope that this turns to dust at some point. Otherwise, I have it forever.
It's like the medallion in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the guy when he throws it in the fire and then the Nazi dude tries to pick it up from the fire and it's like forever burned into the palm of his hand.
God. This does feel very much kind of like, again, it's hard not to compare it to The New Order, which is a game that we can never cover on the podcast because it's too good.
It's too good.
It's
too good a
for
game.
the podcast.
We can't talk about that on this. We
Even though
have
I'm
to
sure-
side door it. We have to talk about Wolf 09 and to side door into the New Order, which we're doing right now.
Pretty much, yeah. It is so, but like, just the fact that like they go in one direction with how do we turn an id like action, you know, shooter guy into a fully fledged character, while in this they just go, no, that is the character. Like, he is high definition in 3D, but we are still going to keep to the canon of guy doesn't speak.
He's 3D in graphics, but not in
graphics,
character
but not
and
in-
motivation.
Yeah, exactly. He will become more and more realized, but not internally. He will still be like if Duke Nukem never spoke, is BJ Blazkowicz.
Right. I mean, it's like, you know, one of the kind of amazing achievements of video game graphics that I just love to look at is that picture of like the BJ face from Wolfenstein 3D next to the Machine Games one, because it's such a remarkable kind of like, it does look like him. It just looks like him with literally 1 million times more triangles on it. Yeah. And it's like, that's so kind of like, oh my gosh, this is how you take an old game and you make it into a new game. And in this, it's just, like, I kind of can't get over the fact that he is just a guy, and it's like every cutscene, it's like, oh, here's BJ with his MP40, and like that's all he's ever gonna do.
The cutscenes are hilarious, by the way. I don't know, I was dying every time BJ would run into a cutscene with his machine gun, and he's just like, the way he's like swinging it about, just like,
God, yeah.
It's like he's not holding anything. Like there's no weight to it. The character animation's like he's not holding anything at all.
Again, it never gets to the point where he can dual wield like 2 assault rifles like in the Machine Games ones, but everything does just feel completely weightless to the point that he never runs out of ammo. He just knocks somebody in the head with his gun and takes their gun. That's just how he restocks. He never reloads.
Yeah, I think one of the things one of the parallels I draw between 3D and New Order that isn't really accomplished in 09 is speed. And there's something to say about the id games, specifically when Carmack and Romero were still there, was that they played with kind of like a speed and an intensity that gets lost, I want to say, in first-person shooters slowly through the 90s and into the 2000s, where we start seeing like, oh no, it's real and it's grounded and
we
it's
have sprint
blah, blah,
buttons
blah.
now.
Yeah, it's like you gotta reload, you gotta take cover, you gotta do all this
You gotta
stuff.
reload, you just don't have a big pile of ammo that you just keep shooting through. And we get to Wolf 09, and I think one of the things that probably is one of the worst aspects of it is that it is kind of it's like a cover shooter, but without really great cover mechanics, and it's a little bit slow. So when you compare it to any other Wolfenstein game, either 3D or the Machine Games ones, it sticks out as this like, oh yeah, it's a little plotty, it's a little.
It definitely feels like, because with the Machine Games ones, it feels like they gave him a blank check to essentially...
Yeah.
If you have an idea in mind of how he's going to move and control, you go ahead, because you probably have a better grasp on this.
And I'll say something controversial. I think Doom 2016 gets too much credit, and New Order gets not enough credit for basically bringing an old property back into a way that it should be portrayed. Because Doom 2016 is fast and furious and all that stuff, and it basically plays like, it makes you feel like you're playing the original Doom in a way that is fully realized in a full 3D environment, as opposed to just kind of like fighting, 2D pixel monsters. But yeah, Wolfenstein New Order, I feel like deserves a little bit more credit for accomplishing
16
that.
Doesn't exist without it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It is like, it had to kind of break down the boundaries a little bit of, we can make something that feels a little bit... Well, that's the thing. It doesn't even feel old-fashioned in regards to it feels clunky. It just feels old-fashioned in, as you said, of the speed of it and just kind of the intensity of it, which is still kind of thoroughly modern in, just the actual mechanisms of how you play it. But
sure,
09 is very much people like Call of Duty.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that it's like, what you have is the slow-mo, and when you trigger that slow-mo, you can abandon all cover and just kind of sprint down corridors, because they do, credit to them, you move much faster when you're in the kind of like dark world or whatever. And so the best parts of this game are everyone else is slow and you are running either with your MP40 or with a laser gun or something, and kind of just like running circles around these guys, and that's great. But it's still linked to a meter and it has to recharge, and it's like they're scared to really let you, like, it doesn't feel like they can really build the game around that because it's too powerful, and so instead they just make it very limited.
Yeah.
So we had an interesting thing with the game that we covered in a previous episode, Quake 4, which is the initial part of that game you play as a soldier, and it is so slow and plodding feeling. And then the moment...
You can't run. The soldier is not able to run.
Yeah, you have walk or
Walk
slower
slowly.
walk. And then the moment, and then, I mean, I don't know if you played Quake 4 or not, but you know about the struggification scene, right?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so like, it's funny. There's a PC Gamer article that I mentioned, which is like a defense of Quake 4, and like the two things that they go. Here's two things that everybody knows about this game. One, the struggification scene. Two, is not a good. It's the worst Quake game, and the struggification scene is the thing that people remember because it's like this from like all in engine from your perspective cutscene where you go through a conveyor belt and you're essentially. Your limbs are chopped off and you're turned into like a cyborg
very
soldier.
like RoboCop.
Very
It's a
Verhoeven.
RoboCop scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The moment you're sent into the Strog, your speed goes back to like Quake 2 levels, and like you have more armor and health, and shooting even feels snappier. And it's like the trick that they're pulling is essentially you have to kind of go through hell at the beginning to then really appreciate how it feels at the halfway point. And it's like. It's bold, but it's
a bold choice, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out.
bold choice, Cotton, and doesn't quite work for Quake 4 because you can't
It
really
takes
make
like 4 hours to get to that point.
It's difficult to make the argument for it that you would for like Spec Ops: The Line, where it's like that's sort of what they're conditioning you on.
Well, and it's interesting in that Wolfenstein: The New Colossus kind of half does that because in the first half of the game you're in. Yeah, so in the first half of New Colossus, you're in a wheelchair, and then you get in and you're not in the wheelchair for very long, but then you get in a mech suit, which has less health but more armor, which in theory could make you play different, but I think in practice doesn't really. It's like it's not a big enough change. But then and so then you kind of get a new body. And again, in theory, you would play differently with that new body than you would with your old. But it may be out of fear of making the first part of the game, too boring or too hard to play through. They don't really adjust your abilities. And so it's interesting to see, like, okay, you could go more whole hog on that, but, like, you are going to pay the price because players will be bored by this part where they're not having fun.
Right.
No, and so I guess, like, in 09's case... Maybe it works a little bit better because 95% of the time you are stuck with the regular movement, and so by putting it on a resource, when you give it the burnout boost injection and it plays like a better shooter, you go, okay, well, I can just kind of juice this up whenever I need this, rather than again keeping it to the other side of the game, where in Quake's 4 case, really good when they bring that in for an hour, then it starts to nosedive pretty badly after that.
Yeah, I think that's actually an interesting what your phrase just James was interesting, because you said you press the button and it turns into a better shooter, and I think that's like that's like a design choice that you don't want to run into. I don't think, where it's like, I think you want the base game to be really fun. And then this thing to just be like a cherry on top, whereas opposed to the base game's good. It's like, okay. And then you press the button, and you're like, oh, fuck yeah, this is how it should feel.
I mean, to be honest, though, Raven Software weren't going to be like, oh, the base game is going to be crap, and then the button's going to make it better. Like, they would have known that they would have said, no, the game is good, but then you use the boost button and it gets better. Again, it's like Burnout. Burnout already feels good, but then you use the boost and it gets even better, But... yeah, I just don't particularly love the shooting or the feeling of the shooting in this.
Can we talk about the gun selection in this game? Because I find it very strange that you have, so you have like kind of your normal World War II weapons, which are a single shot, bolt action, more or less, or what is it? It's like the Car 98. It's something, it's a long range. It has 6 shots in a clip. It takes a long time to reload. So that's kind of your sniper rifle. And then you have 2 machine guns. You've got the MP40 and the something else that feel basically the same as each other. And then you have a whole bunch of weird guns. You have essentially 2 laser guns. You have kind of a particle beam one and a Tesla rifle. and you have like a flamethrower and you have a very limited ammo rocket launcher, but it's like you never get a shotgun, which is so strange, especially in a game where you slow down time and run up to people, and they don't give you a shotgun, which is intensely weird. Or like, you don't have a pistol, which is fine, but it's just kind of like, when you're playing this game, the number, like, the row of kind of selecting powers and weapons literally goes all the way to the plus. It goes from 1, like, past 0 to the minus and the plus sign. And yet, I still felt like I was like, why do I have 2 machine guns that feel exactly the same, and I don't have a shotgun, and I have, like, 2 laser rifles that feel essentially the same, but have, like, different ammo pools? It's just, like, strange decisions about kind of what they did give you in your arsenal and what they don't.
Well, I was going to say, they give you 2 rocket launchers, because you get, like, a standard, like,
oh, that's
RPG
right. Yeah, I forgot one.
And then you get the one which shoots the blue bombs, which kind of feels exactly the same, except that the area of effect explosion that it does is slightly different, and it's just like... Yeah, the fact that this game hasn't got a shotgun is bizarre. Like,
yeah, honestly, if you're making a first-person shooter and you don't put a shotgun in it, you better have a goddamn good reason.
It's like, especially because Fear was certainly out by this point, right?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
So it's like Fear is a game made of slow motion, and the best thing you do in that game is shoot people with a shotgun. And so the idea that they're making a first-person slow motion game and they don't give you a shotgun is
And here's the thing. Raven Software aren't like strangers to Quake 4, like, literally before this, the first... Like, you start with a pistol, but then the second weapon that you get is a pump-action shotgun. Like, I think it's, like, single barrel, but it is decent enough. And then, I don't know, it's funny, because, like, their whole kind of thing is that because they start in the fantasy genre, when they do fantasy guns, it's usually pretty good. Like, the arcing on the Tesla gun in this, I think, is... It looks nice, and it
sure. I mean, the particle beam that, like, dissolves people is super fun to use.
Yeah.
But it is like, when they do the World War II style weapons, it is just... Because even Soldier of Fortune, which is ostensibly set in the modern day, the guns
and in the real world. Because remember, in Soldier of Fortune, all these stories happened. John Mullins saved us.
Jacob,
4 times.
have you played Soldier of Fortune?
Yeah, I certainly have not.
Oh god, it's a good effort. So they hired so Activision. They got the license for the magazine, and they were like, we brought in a consultant on this. His name is John Mullins. He's a real mercenary, and he's going to help you make the game better. And so essentially, they make him the main character of the game, this real guy. And they're like, everything that happens in the game was based on real stuff that John Mullins did, which includes defusing 4 nuclear warheads, taking out an entire skinhead gang in the subways of New York, a la, like, Death Wish. Meeting Saddam Hussein and saying, hold on, I need your guy, otherwise I'm going to take you out. And Saddam going, okay, he's yours. And then at the end, fighting real-life Grey Fox.
Yeah, a cyber ninja.
Yeah, it is.
Who just takes hits from a rocket launcher like it's nothing.
Yeah. All done by John Mullins.
Thank God for John Mullins.
God,
Made in the USA, John Mullins.
Even that game has realistic, but then, like, all the realistic weapons in that game are tuned so much anyways, because the game's, like, built around the gore system, and, like, I mean, the initial thing is that, we want to make these guns feel as realistic as possible, but, like, it's like Black. Like, they've tuned everything to Hollywood status, so it's
right.
Like,
that's really the only thing I know about Soldier of Fortune is how gross the gore system is.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Honestly, to this game's credit, like, you can blow off, like, hands. I was surprised that it kind of, like, getting up close.
The gore in this is decent.
Sometimes there is, like, just a sledgehammer on the ground that you can pick up and run around with for a while, which is, like, never really and not like an important mechanic at all, but it's like, hey,
It's
you want
not
to slow down
explained
time
or
and hit people
expanded
with a
on. It's
sledgehammer?
just
Yeah.
It's just like there's this. Yeah, you go to one of the mines level, and it's like the first thing you see is a sledgehammer. And it's like sneak up on people and hit it with the sledgehammer. I'm like, okay,
Don't have to tell me twice.
I mean, okay, I was going to, but thanks for giving me permission.
In a very important World War II game, you can sneak up on people and hit them with a sledgehammer like Donkey Kong. It's great.
Yeah. And then they, I mean, we'll talk about it in the next episode, but Raven then like makes probably the best gun that they ever create is in Singularity is going to be the motion tracking bullet, the rifle that you can remote control the bullet in bullet time.
It's basically they give you like the Reckoner from Unreal Tournament, where you can steer the bullets after it leaves the barrel. It's so good,
Right, which is also that's like a Bulletstorm thing that I'm sure Bulletstorm.
Oh
took
yeah, Bulletstorm
from.
did have that.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what the release timing of that would be, but yeah, Bulletstorm had a sniper rifle where you could steer the bullet.
Yeah, I think Bulletstorm is 2013. Yeah, it's 2013, so it's a couple of years after Singularity. But I don't know why more games don't let you just steer bullets. It's great.
Let me be the bullet.
It's just such a good. It's just such a good mechanic. Wolfenstein 9's okay though. I mean, like I said, like it doesn't do anything bad. It's just nothing is particularly exceptional in it. It hasn't got It didn't invent the first-person shooter like Wolfenstein 3D did, but then only Wolfenstein 3D really did that. And it doesn't have, like, the writing or the characters of, like, the New Order. And so you just kind of have this game which is, like... I mean, it was nice going back to it, because it's, like, no FPS games that are made today feel, like, have the kind of structure or pacing of this, where, yeah, still Half-Life 2 is very popular, but this feels like an old-fashioned FPS game where you start at A and you go to B, and it's mostly just a lot of shootouts in between, and then you might get a cool gun that you had to play with a little bit, and it's very hokey. Again, it's not really... Its politics are... It's a World War II game.
Yeah, I've got
the enemies.
This is something that I find really fascinating about this.
Yeah.
Is just like there was this era that is essentially the era you're covering on this show, and before as well. But like,
Yes.
there was a time when World War II was not a thing that needed to be explored. You know, that it was just kind of like, look, World War II is the setting. Nazis are the same as zombies. You can kill them and not feel guilty. We also don't really have to do any work in making them evil. You know, it's like you don't have to like show that a zombie is evil. You just kill it. And that's the same thing here, where it's like, you know, the idea of the Nazis wanting to harness this like black sun has nothing. Like, there's nothing specifically Nazi about that, other than I know in real life they were kind of interested in, like, occult and supernatural stuff. Yeah. But it's like, it has exactly the energy of a History Channel thing about, you know, the Nazis being interested in aliens, where it's like, you know, the History Channel isn't going to explain to you why Nazis are bad. It's just going to be like, well, World War II was a setting, and here's like a fun story. These people did a Holocaust, but like we're talking about aliens, and
we're talking about the wacky stuff they did with aliens.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I don't think in some ways it's weird now that the gaming climate is like, you know, that Wolfenstein kind of has to work so hard to make Nazis obviously evil because Nazis are back in the real world and doing stuff. Yeah. But also, you know, you play this and you're like, I don't know, it's weird that this real life group of awful people is just like, their ideology is just not a part of the game at all. It's just like, we know they're evil and that's what they do.
It's not a part of the game, and it's weird because it doesn't necessarily need to be, because you're right, they were just a shorthand for so long. And now weirdly that they have been as you were saying, you have to work harder to make them the villains. And there's probably a whole deep discussion and dive into this. Is like, does it have anything to do with like, you know, the greatest generation is almost entirely gone, and like there's like this weird cultural memory of, I mean the Jewish people are very good about like remembering and all of that, but speaking as Whitey McWhiteface, white America is like, yeah, you know, that was a while ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or like World War II games and media were almost so ideology-less that it's almost like a, hey, surprise, did you know that there was ideology going on here?
Yeah.
You know,
did you know that the war was fought about something?
About a reason, and not just because,
like,
the MP40 was a fun gun to use, which is essentially the story of every Call of Duty game before 4.
Three of my, and it's weird because my grandparents are all deceased. 3 of the 4 of them fought including one of my grandmothers, fought in World War II. She was part of I think it was called like the Waves program. It was like women in the Navy or something like that.
Sure.
So 3 of the 4 of them were active combatants in World War II. And I think there is something to say about, as time progresses and you get further away, the fact that that they were just used as shorthand, and Jacob, as you said, there's no ideology reinforced. Like, you're not reinforcing what their ideology was. You're just assuming that everybody gets this shorthand. The longer you go just repeating that the shorthand is shorthand, it becomes meaningless.
Yeah.
And people who don't have, like, younger generations that don't have connections to, like, I had connections to my grandparents who actually had war stories fighting against Nazis. You know what I mean? It's different now, where it's like it becomes separate. It becomes a kind of clouded. History
and I definitely think
clouded.
it's a thing with Raven Software as well, which is like, and it's not to say that like games are better now because it does actually get into the ideology of, like, obviously, again, even if the New Order didn't really dig into this stuff, I think I think it is because the New Order and the New Colossus digs into that stuff is what makes them so interesting. But, like, with, like, Raven Software's games, they don't really dig into they kind of just more like the sort of the pulp aesthetic of stuff. Because, again, they do Soldier of Fortune, which is, you go under the surface of it and it is just right-wing crank propaganda, but it is in the style of stuff like Death Wish and, like, you know, Commando and films of that time. So they're not, like, gripping with right-wing ideology at all. They are basically photocopying photocopies of that. And that kind of becomes their thing through, even when we get all the way to Singularity, where the enemies of that game are the Russians during the Cold War. But they're purely chosen just because of the fact that the Raffles who works on it really liked Cold War, like, iconography and just, like, old science fiction films about, like, oh, those crazy Reds have made a time machine and, like, that kind of, like, sci-fi stuff. But they're not, like, and again, I don't think it's, like, one of those things of that, oh, they don't know how to, like, deal with this stuff. It's just more that it's not where their bread is buttered. Like, they prefer more the kind of, I mean, they're D&D nerds. They made Heretic and Hexen.
You know, you can trace it all the way back to, like, Medal of Honor being, like, you know, game developers seeing Saving Private Ryan and being like, we gotta
as well, yeah,
right, yeah. It's like we gotta do that. You know, not that we have to make the war, but we have to replicate the war films and, like, you know. So I think the things that this game likes is, like, the image of kind of resistance fighting Nazis in a crowded European street, and they like the underground kind of, like, headquarters hidden behind a bookshelf, and all of that stuff is very movie stuff more than it is, like, real life stuff, you know. So they like these aesthetics that are all from Hollywood, which is not, again, not necessarily terrible, but it means that it doesn't really have much to explore because they're just doing movie things.
And going back to what was said earlier in regards to when they bang, it's the sci-fi stuff. The stuff they like about World War II is like the Captain America comic stuff, where it is propaganda that's coming out of World War II, but you're taking things that might be rooted in reality and then just taking it that extra step of science fiction, which again, all the Wolfenstein games have that. I mean, the first one ends with you fighting Hitler in a mech suit,
Right.
It's
like,
War
we shouldn't pretend that it was once highbrow and this is taking
absolutely
it down.
not, no.
It was the highest of highbrow
that's what
entertainment.
is so brilliant about the New Order, though, as we almost said earlier, their big inspiration for that game was Inglourious Basterds in regards to how do we toe the line of trying to tell a serious story about World War II and Nazi ideology, but also having the pulpy elements of the old games, and they see Inglourious Basterds and they go, like that.
Oh,
essentially.
Yeah, the basically alt history is...
Yeah, and they managed to make a character better than any character in Inglourious Basterds, I would argue.
There we go,
yeah. Yeah, and they didn't have to show anybody's feet to do it.
Do y'all have...
Sorry, guys. Jacob, get us out of this. Please segue out.
What I was wondering playing this, as I mentioned earlier with the terrible final boss, if y'all were developing or would develop essentially a bingo card for this type of game in just like the things that they all have, because the things in this one that I was thinking about was like, okay, you got a terrible final boss, you have, I don't know. The other one that really occurred to me was bad ladders. Ladders that don't feel good to go up and down. Probably another one you could do is like randomly there's like a sexy woman enemy where it's like you have a bunch of just indistinguishable dudes, and then it's like, oh yeah, here's a dominatrix and you have to fight her as well.
God, I love the idea of this bingo card. Kevin, I absolutely have my answer to this, but you go, what would we put on our our bullet time FPS bingo cards? What's coming to your mind?
I mean, I really do like the little tiny fucking creatures that you can't shoot.
Oh yeah.
This
game doesn't have, unfortunately.
This game doesn't have them.
But all the other Raven games we covered have this.
They're just so tiny, and you can't hit them because they're moving too fast.
You know this game does. When you go into the dark zone, it's full of fucking
It has those little floaty guys, and then if you shoot too many of them, they attack you. Yes, absolutely.
Jesus.
And a bad checkpoint system, which is playing a game right now for another episode, and the checkpoint drops you before an unskippable cutscene every time you die.
That is the one thing that this game in Singularity doesn't have that the other Raven stuff has,
this
which
one's
is quick
pretty
saving,
decent.
quick loading.
This one's pretty decent, yeah.
My go-to, and I'm thinking about this with all the episodes, all of these games have jobbers in them, as in AI NPC characters who go, "We'll go out in front, sir, and see if anything bad's happening. Oh no, I've just got killed by an enemy. Oh no, I've just got killed by a trap, which you need to now know, oh, there's going to be traps in front of you." Wolfenstein doesn't have that too much because it's mostly just BJ on his own. The only other time that you see soldiers are in the street sections, and they're usually quite competent against the other Nazis, but there are earlier games where it is... I mean, Star Trek's a fucking brilliant example of it because they're literally the red shirts from Star Trek, where it's like, oh, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, what does this alien flower do? Oh, it explodes. Oh, no. Or in Star Wars, they have the... funnily enough, it isn't their jobber enemies. They'll have the stormtroopers be, hey, what's going on in there? Ah, explosion. Oh, now it's changed the geometry of the level. So all the perfect example though isn't a Raven Software game. It is one that we covered earlier on with Nevin called Legendary, where they try and do the Half-Life 2. Well, again, Half-Life 2 I think is the perfect example of what is a jobber enemy, because they're the people who get taken up by the barnacles or stuff, and that's how they warn you about that stuff. Legendary has that happen every 10 seconds. Where they will introduce, hey, I'm a new squad member, I'll help you out. They will walk a meter in front of you and then get killed by something. and then behind the other door, it's like, damn, shame that guy died. Hi, I'm your new guy. Let's go ahead.
I'm your new guy. Let's go another 10 feet down the hallway.
It's literally just like every other human being in that world exists purely to warn you about something that's coming up. It is so bad.
So jobbers, yeah.
Jobbers,
I think that's a
I think
good
that's
one.
it's a wrestling term in it where it's like
It is, yeah.
Yeah, those are the wrestlers that you put in place to basically get beaten by who they want the new popular wrestler to be. So
they it's just a job. They get in there and they lose.
But yeah, funnily enough, the Wolfenstein 09 doesn't really have a lot of. I mean, people do die like
in the town sequences. There's a lot of times in town sequences where you'll be cutting across the town. And
I was thinking
there'll be
more
a guy,
when
BJ this way, and you like. There's like two guys, and then they get all shot up by Nazis, and it's like you versus
or they hit
20.
like a landmine or something. I was thinking more the level where you go to the hospital and they introduce the Nightcrawler from X-Men Nazi, who's literally
Nightcrawler
bamfing behind
bamps all
people
over
and
you.
then just. Which weird thing about that, which we haven't talked about. So like, even though this is like the game that we're covering after Quake 4, they do two other games in between this that we're not covering because they're not FESs, which are X-Men. Oh no, they do Marvel Ultimate Alliance, which is like their sequel to X-Men Legends. But they also do the X-Men Wolverine game, which is the one which is based on the movie, but is like better than the movie.
Is that the one that's rated M, or is that a different one?
Yes.
Okay,
No,
yeah,
it is.
because that one's pretty good, right? Like,
Yeah,
at least has
it's
a
like-
good reputation.
It's like really decent, like of the time God of War style action game, and it's not. And again, it's not doing anything exceptional. It's just really solid. But it also has a cool move where if you like hit one of the shoulder buttons, he just fires ahead and just like sticks his claws into people, and you use that for platforming challenges. It's just like the
that's
homing
great.
attack in Sonic
Yeah, I mean,
Adventure,
you know,
except people get.
Thankfully, this game does not have platforming, which is, I feel like, another bingo card
shitty
thing.
platforming. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, Raven
Shitty
Software have
platforming.
got a lot of bad platforming in their games, going all the way back to Heretic, where literally the innovation was, we've added jumping to the Doom engine, and it's just like, no,
Oh no.
you've ruined FES games forever, you monsters.
Oh god. Yeah. So we'll figure it out, but we need a 3x3 grid, right?
Yeah, we'll do a
for-
3x3 grid. I reckon we can
Yeah.
get it up to 9 pretty easily, but
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Wolfenstein 09. I mean, it is funny because it's just like every time we talk about it, it's just like we then start to talk about the New Order because it's just
It's
more
fine.
interesting.
Let's talk about other better Wolfenstein games.
We haven't played Return to Castle Wolfenstein yet. I don't know whether we're not going to do Wolfenstein Enemy Territories. I don't. Oh, actually, maybe we might. Well, speaking of which, did anybody try the multiplayer in this?
Oh god, no.
No. So this
the
is
multiplayer for a PC game that functionally does not exist.
yeah. No, I dipped my head into it just to see if it had bots. It doesn't. Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing with these Raven episodes is that I'm terrified that there'll be like commenters like, why didn't you talk about the multiplayer in Star Trek Elite Forces? That's the best part of that game. And it's just like, we couldn't get it working, and that's not really where our bread is buttered. We kind of prefer the campaigns a little bit more than the multiplayer stuff.
We're not doing that.
But yeah, I believe that the multiplayer in this is fine, but it's also out the same year as Modern Warfare 2, so it's like, why wouldn't... You're probably going to play that instead.
That really does put this into context of, like, you know, for all the things you can say about Call of Duty, it's like, I think about Modern Warfare 2's campaign, you know, of like the things that you do in that and the set pieces and whatever, and it's like, oh, I think I had mentally put this game as like 5 years before that, but like the fact that they happened at the same time is like,
no, here's the
boy.
thing, like, and this has been the thing with the Raven series, is that like, just off in the distance, getting closer and closer like a train, is Call of Duty Modern Warfare, because the first one comes out in 2007, which is like 2 years after Quake 4, which is what these guys have done. And like Quake 4 feels like the end of that like generation of slightly not quite good Call of Duty 2 inspired little bits of Half-Life in their shooters. And then Modern Warfare 1 and 2 come out, and it's just like... It's like the meteor that kills the dinosaurs. Like, everything kind of gets reset at that point. And Singularity comes out a year after this and doesn't do very well because, again, people have still got Modern Warfare 2 in their mind. And so they go to Raven Software and they're just kind of like, well, you can make FPS games, but we don't want you to make, like, full campaigns anymore. You're going to do all the maps for Call of Duty games until the end of time, until they do the campaign for Black Ops Cold War, which is kind of weird considering Soldier of Fortune and, you know, the politics of that. And then Warzone, which means that they're never going to make an original FPS game ever again because they will just be working on Warzone until...
No, but they've probably also made, like, the highest earning FPS of all time.
Well, that's the thing. Call of Duty, Battle Royale, the two... Oh, these two really popular things together are exceptionally popular. Who saw that one coming, huh?
Yeah, I guess it's, you know, it's both a positive and negative that the hardest thing about, like, talking about an old game is remembering the context that it was in, because I'm playing this thinking, okay, it's a game that came out in 2009. I think it feels pretty good, and now we're 13 years later and games are better. But it's like, if I played this and Modern Warfare 2 back to back, you know, I would feel like this was made in like the previous decade. Like it really, I think if you were playing then, you'd be like, God, what are we even doing? I'm still running around with an MP40. Like, don't they know that this is not what first person shooters are anymore?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because it is like playing Wolfenstein 09 out of context. You go, well, this is a throwback. But then you realize it's like a throwback to like a PS2 style game, not like...
Yes!
Like, because again, like, this came out the same year as Modern Warfare 2, Left 4 Dead 2, fucking Halo ODST, Borderlands. Like, all these still very modern feeling FPS... I mean, it also comes out the same year as Sphere 2, which we'll probably do on the podcast at some point, because that's a game that no one remembers at this point.
Right.
Oh, and also The Conduit, the Wii FPS game.
Oh, look, as someone who only had a Wii for a very long time, I was excited that I was finally going to get a hardcore game with The Conduit.
Amazing.
Not quite.
I've always, again, The Conduit is like another game that is like I'd like to try for the podcast, because again, same as you, I'd heard about it for like years and years, and I was like, whoa, they've made an FPS game like for the Wii, for all the good things it can do. This is going to be amazing. And then just like disappeared. Yeah. Nobody knows what The Conduit is anymore. But yeah, like, it's funny. This feels like a throw. Like, and again, I think that's kind of when Raven Software is at their best, their stuff feels like it's from the Quake era. Like, because what we kind of get into is that, like, I think even though our kind of power rankings are going to be very much like their later games are going to be pretty high up, because I'm just kind of used to newer style games anyways. And this has all the quality of life features that you'd expect of like a game that came out 10 years ago. That and Singularity. You can go back and you can play them absolutely fine. They're not exceptional, but they play great. Versus like Heretic and Hexen, where you have to jump through hoops to get them working, but they're just like way more ambitious than what other people were doing at the time, to the point that they've aged terribly compared to Doom and Quake, which are so Spartan and simple. They've just aged wonderfully as they've kind of turned into these speedrunner style puzzle shooters. But yeah, it's bizarre. Like, just kind of, they feel like a remnant. Like, Raven kind of feels like a bit of a remnant of the past in regards to what their own games felt like, which, again, I don't know, Modern Warfare 2 may get to a point where that also feels kind of antiquated, but that still is like, apart from maybe, I mean, Titanfall 2 doesn't really evolve on it that much, apart from just give you more movement options and move it to a sci-fi
No, I mean,
setting
it's like, you know, the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 that comes out this year will probably feel not that dissimilar from the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 that came out in 2009.
Absolutely not, no. And at this point, you only kind of have three kinds of FPS games, which are games that still feel like Modern Warfare 2, games that still feel like Far Cry 3, and Battle Royales. And it's just sort of like, apart from like in the indie
yeah.
space and
I guess-
boomer shoots, it's, but not really. Going back and playing Wolfenstein 9 was kind of a bit of a nice reprieve of.
Would you say the like Dying Light style game is an iteration on Far Cry 3?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
a
mean,
little bit.
it's interesting because there's this subcategory of like melee focused first person
Yeah,
games,
the melee
which are
melee
interesting,
parkour
which is
game,
almost
yeah.
that's kind of like an outgrowth of Skyrim. It feels
Right.
like. It's like, what if
Yeah.
Skyrim, but it felt good to run around, or what if Skyrim,
What if
but it was
Skyrim,
gory?
but felt good?
Yeah.
So all in
Send
all,
your
what's
hate
up?
mail to skyrimisgood@gmail.com.
If you want to complain about Skyrim, please leave us a 5-star review on your podcast app of choice and put
We'll
that
read it out
comment below.
Yeah, we'll read it.
Overall, what do we feel? So, Wolfenstein 9, what's our final thoughts? Or is it Wolfenstein 0 fine? Or is it Wolfenstein ach nein? As in the German for oh no, because it's bad. Where do we weigh it?
I mean, it's like it is not. There's nothing in it offensive, and I don't just mean that politically. It's just like it is exactly a video game. It's
Yes.
like, and it does the things you want a video game to do, and it kind of doesn't stretch any farther than that. And so, like, I had a good time playing through it because I like a video game,
Sure.
but like that is about as, the highest praise I can give it is just like, if you were playing first person shooters in the mid-aughts, you will go back to this and think, yes, I remember doing exactly this. But there's really nothing in it that I was like, why haven't we brought this forward to today?
No.
Right.
This feels like a dead end in regards to... Well, not like a dead end. I guess it feels like this was a stop and then they evolved on it again. And it either went in the direction of like the machine game stuff, which almost kind of flirts with the boomer shootery kind of thing, or Modern Warfare 2.
There's no lineage to it beyond this. It's not really inspiring anybody.
It is of its time, which again I think is, when taken as a whole with Raven Software's other stuff, this is where the wheels kind of come off the cart a little bit, because they're no longer the people that id Software go to and say, we've built this engine, we've built the simple games to show it off, but we want you to make the really ambitious stuff. We want you to do... We want you to make a Star Wars game in the Quake 3 engine. And you go, whoa, like, I can't believe they...
That's actually... the parallel is, we're Raven the jobbers for id. The ones that they sent out first to step on the landmines.
Yeah, but sometimes they stepped on the landmines and came up with Hexen, which is brilliant. And then sometimes they stepped on the landmines and made Quake... I don't know, even
4. Quake
4 is better... it's even hard to say that it's better than Doom 3. They're both not very good, but like I enjoyed more of Quake 4 than I did of Doom 3.
There are a lot of people who will defend Doom 3 to the death. I'll say that. I don't see
Yeah,
that people
I'll give
lining
it
up
this.
for Quake 4.
Doom 3 is aged better than Quake 4, much like Doom has aged better than Heretic. So
Yeah. But final thoughts. I agree. I concur with Jacob. It is a video game. I went to the video game store and I had ordered one video game and I got this video game, and it was exactly that.
if I went to Blockbuster Videos in 2009 and picked this up, I would have had a smashing time over the weekend playing it. If I had paid full price for it, I don't know. Again, I think it's one of those things, again, playing it years after the fact, getting it from abandonedgames.com, I'm probably a little bit warmer on it than somebody may have been who paid full price for it, who may have said, well, I could buy Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which is where all my friends are and it has this awesome prestige system. But Wolfenstein is a known brand. I got to buy this game. This is the better choice. And it's like, yeah. But I don't know. I am glad that I finally played it for the podcast after years of being kind of fascinated by it. Just in regards to one, it's World War II. Everybody knows what that looks like, but it's weird World War II, which has zombies and stuff in it. It's like, that's cool. More of that, please. But then Call of Duty eventually has its zombies mode and, World of War, and it's like, well, okay, so this is just kind of, you've sort of taken the Wolfenstein thing now, and you're doing a better version of it because you've made it a horde mode, so it's like,
Exactly.
Well, and then Wolfenstein kind of has its sort of reimagining with the machine game stuff, and goes off in that brilliant direction, and so you're just kind of left with 09, which is this interesting snapshot of not what FPS games were like at the time, but what like FPS games were like 4 years prior, and might have done really well on the PS2, but on the Xbox, competing against Modern Warfare 2.
Meh.
Yeah. But I had a nice time with it. I liked using the slowed down powers.
Yeah.
I liked fighting Hans Gross. The final boss kind of... All the bosses.
No, it's terrible.
It's like,
Don't defend that final boss.
I didn't like shooting the dogs. I guess it was funny when the Nazi women turned up and started running at me like Terminator because I was not expecting it. 7 out of 10. Hot Cider 2021. Put that on my headstone. There we go. Jacob, we're going to play a little game if you're interested, just to just to see out the show. So this game came out on August 18th, 2009, and it qualified.
Are we doing
for
the box office game?
We are doing the box office game, but we're using VG.
I'm Griffin.
charts.
He's David.
Yeah, who is the Griffin?
Right,
who's Griffin and David out of us? God.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm Griffin because I chat. I do most of the chatting, and I got a high pitched voice. There you go. And you're the David because you're actually from England, maybe. I don't know. I guess maybe I'm Griffin. Oh no, I guess that
Well,
makes me
David
then.
has a kid, and I have a kid, so I think that's
true. Yeah. So when you
how
think
it
about
works.
it, we have elements of Griffin and David between us.
We do.
This
Baby.
game qualified for the charts on August 22nd. It debuted at number 5 in the US charts, shifting 65,000 units on the Xbox 360. So all I need you two to tell me is what were in the 4 other places before it. Starting with number 1 in its second week on the charts is a sports franchise.
Is it Madden?
It is a Madden. But
So
do you
it
know
would
which
be
one
Madden
it is?
2010 for
It is-
2009?
Ding, ding, ding. Madden NFL 2010.
Why are sports franchises always the year ahead? As with everything else with a year, I've never understood
it's
why.
weird.
And NBA 2K23 releases this year.
We had a
Right.
look at some of the charts that we do for like games that come out in March and February. Last year's game usually is like further ahead, and I think it's just because then it has a year to be. I guess it's like the sports
Right.
season starts in September and then goes on until.
It's just always been confusing to me.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think
Number 2 in
that
the
I think
charts. Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
number
go-
2 in the charts. Go for it.
No, Kevin, you had a really good point. Go ahead.
Oh, I had a thought was that I think they name it after the year that the season ends.
Ow, there we go.
So NBA 2K23, this is the 22-23 season.
There you go. Okay, learn
There it
something
is.
new every day.
By the way, it's the last named FIFA EA football title coming out this year. But not only that, Ted Lasso's in it.
Oh,
How do you feel about that, Kevin? As
feel
somebody
great.
you've seen Ted Lasso before. I can't remember if you.
yeah,
liked
no,
Ted
I've watched
Lasso or not.
I watched first 2 seasons. I enjoy Jason Sudeikis. I
Would
feel
you,
like
will you be buying FIFA 23 to see digital Jason Sudeikis? As
I feel like that's a bit of a stretch. To,
I won't be
of my
spending $70
bit of a-
bucks.
That's a bit of a
It is.
stretch of my personality to accept that into my brain. But
Fair enough. Well,
yeah, so number 2.
number 2 in the charts, in its 4th week, is an all-time best-selling game. And of the era that this game came out, this is like when this game is at its like height, essentially.
Is it like World of Warcraft?
It's not World of Warcraft, no.
Is it Wii Sports 2?
It is Wii Sports 2. But what is the actual subtitle? What is not called Wii Sports 2? What
is
the
it
actual
really? The Wii Sports Resort?
Wii Sports Resort, yes.
I did not know that was such a barn burner of a game. I knew, obviously, everyone had Wii Sports, just because everyone had a Wii, but I didn't know Resort actually pushed that many numbers.
Not to make reference to the fact that we do these out of order, but when we do Singularity, this is like in the charts for longer, and it's like it still hasn't been. It moves up to like number 3. It never leaves the top 5. Now, number 3 on the charts in its second week is a PS3 sports title.
PS3 exclusive?
No, it's
it's the PS3 version,
but it's the PS3 version.
MLB The Show.
It's not MLB The Show.
I
guess that every
FIFA?
episode.
It is not FIFA.
So, an NBA?
It is not NBA.
Wow.
Is it a racing game?
It's not a racing game.
Is it hockey?
It is not hockey.
This is so funny. What?
Is it
what
cricket?
else?
I will give you
golf?
a clue, and fingers on buzzers for this one. It's already been said.
It's already been
we've
already said it. Madden 10?
Yes,
Madden 10 for PS3.
Oh my God, it's Madden NFL 2010 for the PS3. Is at number 3 this week.
So number 1 is 360.
Yeah, it's the 360
Madden.
version.
That's so funny.
But Wii Sports Resort is just so powerful that it has to be
Video
in
game
second
charts are
place.
so
It split
dumb.
the Maddens. That's wild.
Now, number 4, and this, what I'm about to say should probably give it away, in its 144th week on the charts.
Is it Wii Sports?
It is Wii Sports.
Okay.
Wii Sports
Oh my
what?
god.
The
Wow.
prequel to Wii Sports Resort, Wii Sports, in its 144th week.
I mean, honestly, impressive of Wolfenstein to it's 4 sports games and Wolfenstein. So
That's
you know,
amazing.
good job.
Good
It
job,
is
Wolfenstein.
2 Wii games at the absolute height of Wii Mania, and a sports title which will always be in the top of the charts.
That is so funny. God.
Followed by Wii Fit at number 6 in its 66th week. Then at 7, Wolfenstein for the PS3. At number 8, Mario Kart Wii in its 69th week. Fossil Fighters for the DS at number 9, a game that I've never heard of. And then finally, Madden NFL 2010 for the Wii at number 10.
Wow.
Wow.
This is so much less interesting than the blank check ones. I mean, I love it. I'm so glad you did it. But it's like, yeah, the charts are so boring.
Especially in the era that we're now talking about, which is we're in the height of Wii Mania. So
Yeah,
it's
the
going to be
the Wii just messes every chart up.
the one
literally,
that we do with Jesse is like the 3 top results are
Wii
the same
games.
game. God. Jacob, it has been lovely having you on the podcast to talk about Wolfenstein and sports games in the chat. Where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, I'm thank you so much for having me. First of all, I really I truly love the shtick of this show. I think it is such a good idea, and I'm really glad you're doing it. So happy to be on. You can find me on YouTube as Jacob Geller or Twitter as Jacob Geller, pretty much anywhere. I am frequently a guest on the podcast MinMax, and so if you like hearing me in podcast form, you can listen to MinMax, which I really like as a podcast, even when I'm not on it.
Fair enough. Kevin, once again, always lovely to have you back for these episodes of That's So Raven. Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at The Arcadeologist, and you can find my podcast, PixelLit, on Twitter at PixelLitPod and Instagram PixelLitPod, and you can listen to it wherever fine podcasts are sold. PixelLit, we read, recap, and review video game novelizations and media tie-ins. So
Nice.
check us out, pixelitpod.com.
Cool. As usual, I've been James. You can find me on Twitter at Hotcider, HOTCYDER. Next episode, we come to the end of That's So Raven, and come to the end of Raven Software's original titles, because we made it, folks. We're looking at 2010's Singularity, a game that we've made reference to quite a bit on this podcast, and we'll be talking about it. We'll be joined by No Clip podcast producer Jesse Garasha, so please join us for that. Until next time, though, folks, keep blasting.
Pew, 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 pew.
Okay. Stop blasting. Stop blasting. The Bullet Time podcast is made possible by Eric Hamilton Schneider, Valerie B, VG, and the Hot Cider support tier. If you'd like to help with the production of episodes and gain access to extra content, consider supporting over at patreon.com/Hot Cider. That's HOTCYDER. A special thanks to Max Coburn for the Bullet Time theme tune.